Sorry for the delay. A lot of us were in appropriations and we got tied up, so glad to be here now. We're going to go ahead and start with the hearing on HB 2433, and we'll get a going to go ahead and open that hearing, and we'll get a description of the bill from the reviser, Charles Reimer.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. House Bill 2433 would require that online marketplaces, that is websites, that host a third-party seller who makes at least 200 or more sales into Kansas and for an aggregate amount of at least $5,000 in gross revenues, to require the disclosure of certain identification, financial, and contact information from that third-party seller to the online marketplace. And then the online marketplace is required to provide that information to consumers and also to suspend a seller who fails to meet the requirements of the Act. Violations of the Act would constitute a deceptive act or practice under the Consumer Protection Act, and the Act is to be enforced by the Attorney General. Turning to Section 1 of the bill, Section 1, page 1, defines key terms. Consumer product, there's a broad definition there, subsection A. It means any tangible personal property distributed in commerce, normally used for personal, family, or household purposes, and it also includes property that is intended to be attached to or installed upon real property. An important definition is that of the high-volume third-party seller. That's a term that appears throughout the bill and what the bill is directed at. It means a third-party seller on an online marketplace who during a 12-month period during the previous 24 months has made 200 or more separate sales of consumer products for delivery into Kansas, involving an aggregate total of $5,000 more in gross revenues. That's subsection B on page 1 there. Online marketplace means any electronically based or access platform facilitates third-party sellers to engage in sales, other business for delivery of consumer products, and hosts one or more third-party sellers who make sales for delivery into Kansas. The term third-party seller has some exceptions. It does not include business entities that have made their name and contact information available to the general public, have an ongoing contractual relationship with the online marketplace to provide for manufacture, distribution, wholesaling, or fulfillment of shipments of consumer products, and also have provided verified identifying information to the online marketplace. Section 2 pertains to information that the online marketplace is to require from a high-volume third-party seller on its platform. That includes providing identification, financial, and contact information, including bank account information or the name of the payee for payments. Seller must also provide contact information, including copies of government-issued photo identification of the seller's individual, or if acting on behalf of a business entity, or if the seller is a business entity, alternatively, a copy of the government record or tax document showing the name and physical address. Also required is an email address and a phone number. The seller must provide either business tax identification number or a taxpayer identification number. And the seller must disclose whether the seller is exclusively selling on the online marketplace or also selling the same consumer product or products on other internet websites. And those requirements are found at page 3 of the bill in subsection A. In subsection B of the bill, page 3, and again, we're in section 2, the online marketplace is required to verify this information that the high-volume third-party sellers to provide within 3 days. And in addition, the online marketplace must annually notify such a seller that they must inform the online marketplace of any changes to their information within 3 days and certify that the information remains correct. If they don't do that, the online marketplace is to suspend the seller's use of the platform if the online marketplace becomes aware that the seller hasn't met the requirements. Subsection 3 on page 3 Subsection A sets out requirements for the online marketplace. The online marketplace is to disclose to consumers through a conspicuous manner on the product listing or link on the product listing the certain specified information obtained from a high volume third-party seller, including the full name, physical address, whether the seller also engages in manufacturing, importing, or reselling of consumer products, and the contact information. Also, if the Attorney General determines that other information is to be provided, that must also be provided. At subsection B on page 4, the bill permits partial disclosure of the identity information in certain specified circumstances, including if the high volume third-party seller does not have a business address or doesn't have a business phone number, just perhaps has a personal address or a personal phone number. A business may also disclose only the physical address for product returns if they have an address like that. However, the online marketplace has a duty that if it becomes aware that a high volume third-party seller has made a false representation to justify partial disclosure or hasn't provided timely responsive answers to consumer inquiries, the online marketplace is to require full disclosure of the identity information. On page 4, an online marketplace is to provide a conspicuous reporting mechanism on the product listing of a high volume third-party seller that permits consumers to report suspicious marketplace activity. And also the online marketplace is to encourage use of that mechanism. An online marketplace that warehouses or fulfills a consumer order must disclose to the consumer the identification of any high volume third-party seller supplying the product if different than the seller listed on the product page. That's at page 5. Section 4 on page 5 provides that a violation of section 2 or 3 constitutes a deceptive act or practice under KSA 5626, the Consumer Protection Act, and shall be subject to the Act's remedies and penalties. The Attorney General is to enforce the Act and may adopt rules and regulations necessary to implement the Act. Section 5 prohibits any political subdivision from requiring online marketplaces to verify information from high volume third-party sellers or to disclose such information to consumers. So a preemption provision there. If passed, the Act would become effective July 1st, 2021. That is what the Act does. And yeah, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for the reviser, Representative Highland?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Charles, this almost sounds like a definition section for a tax bill on marketplace facilitators.
Representative, I noticed that myself.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Dodson?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Charles, if we can look at section 2, is it correct to say the online marketplace would describe someone like Amazon and then one of the major vendors on Amazon, let's say a business like Bed Bath & Beyond who's on there? Would that be the third party? And then I guess the question is, the tracking to me seems massive with the numbers of vendors that sell third-party goods on on places like Amazon, not to mention eBay and so on. Is that what those descriptions describe?
I believe that you are correct, Representative, that that the bill would require, a online marketplace like Amazon to meet its requirements.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the reviser, Representative Carpenter?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Charles, I didn't see any amounts for minimum amounts of transactions or anything like that. So are there any in this bill?
I'm sorry, Representative, I didn't hear your question. I apologize.
Are there any amounts of money or minimum transactions in this bill?
The bill, the only minimum amounts or transactions are contained in the definition of high volume third-party seller, to which these requirements basically apply. And that is found in section 1, the first page of the bill. And as I noted, you know, if you've made a business entity or an individual has made 200 or more separate sales of consumer products for delivery into Kansas involving an aggregate total of 5,000 or more in gross revenues during the 12-month period, during the previous 24 months, then you're a high volume third-party seller. And so the act would require the information from such a seller and require the online marketplace to provide that information to consumers.
So $5,000 in gross revenue, is that what I'm hearing?
The bill states aggregate total of 5,000 or more in gross revenues.
Any further questions? The revisor? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and move on to proponent section. Ryan Ersick with Walmart is here. Welcome to committee, Ryan.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Ryan Ersick with Walmart Public Affairs and Government Relations. Thank you for this opportunity to appear before you in support of House Bill 2433. The bill is rather simple. It requires online marketplaces to verify and authenticate the identity of high-volume third parties who sell products on their platforms. Such information is bank information, such information as name, phone number, email address, tax ID, bank account information, almost as much information as the North Star requires to get a reservation these days. I say that as a joke, but again, that's as simple as the information that this bill is requesting. And we believe that the verification of some of this information would help stop criminals from anonymously setting up accounts and selling stolen and counterfeit products to unsuspecting Kansas consumers. Now, I know that the revisor fielded a few questions as we were going through, and I want to point out this bill is not targeting small businesses or individuals who are trying to do business online. The bill is targeting those high volume sellers who have had over 200 transactions or over $5,000 or more in gross revenues per year. It also provides protection for small businesses who may be just over that, it does provide some protections there where they do not have to disclose their address if they don't have a business address. So, for instance, if you were selling goods out of your residence, you would not have to disclose that residence in order to help protect you. From a Walmart perspective, you know, as many of you know, Walmart is one of the world's largest retailers, not only brick and mortar, but online. And from a Walmart perspective, we believe this is a consumer protection and a business protection bill. From a consumer protection bill, consumer protection standpoint, we believe that this bill provides transparency and accountability. It lets you, as the customer on a Walmart.com, know who you're doing business with. It lets you know where the product is coming from. It helps prevent the purchase of counterfeit goods. And it helps ensure the safety of products. Now, I know we've probably all heard stories of somebody who, you know, they were trying to buy a $10,000 watch online for $1,000, and when they got that product, they were surprised that it wasn't authentic. And I know that we don't have much empathy for folks like that. However, the majority of these crimes are grandparents who are trying to buy their grandkids something for Christmas, and they see a $5 difference. Or they see that product is in stock when it's a hard-to-get Black Friday item. It's moms and dads trying to buy Chiefs jerseys before the Super Bowl. This morning, as I was getting ready to come over this morning, I saw that on a news channel, and I think it was KCTV, they had busted $500,000 in apparel was seized. 469 counterfeit Chiefs jerseys were taken. 163 counterfeit designer handbags and sunglasses were seized, retailing for over $500,000 in product. So it is not just that person who's trying to get a great deal. It's that grandparents, it's that mom and dad who are trying to get out there and shop. Also, as I mentioned, it helps ensure the safety of these products. There's a lot of money that goes into product and design of toys, of flashlights, of X, Y, and Z product, you name it. And when a product is manipulated or counterfeited, a lot of those safety products, or a lot of those safety protocols aren't followed. Therefore, you could end up buying a counterfeit item that could harm your child or harm your friend or family member. From a business perspective, we believe that this will help stop counterfeiting, stealing. It'll help identify some of those bad actors who are on Walmart.com, on xyandz.com. It helps us go after them and stop them. The reason why verifying this information is so helpful to companies like ours is that it prevents, let's just say, a Jason from being able to take their wares and sell counterfeit hats on xyandz.com, getting found out and being slapped on the wrist and saying, all right, you're going to have to take off your product off of our website. And then they just create another website and put the hats back on the next day. And that's what we're seeing happen. A company will get in trouble, or an individual will get in trouble. They'll delete the email address, and the next day they're back on another.com, continuing to rip off customers. So simply put, allowing third parties to sell anonymously leaves the door open for criminals to exploit the system and take advantage of Kansas consumers, and we hope that you can join us in supporting this bill. I also want to mention that, again, one of the world's largest retailers and as one of the owners of the largest, or one of the largest online market centers, we do comply with everything that's in this bill. And for that, I'll stand for questions at the appropriate time, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead and take questions now. Are there any questions for Mr. Ersick? Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm hiding behind you. Appreciate the work to look at the problems that are there. I think they're very real. I think this addresses it well. Just a concern I have for a smaller business versus a larger business where it may be more standard practice to be ready to comply. Have we done any work to look at the possible hardships of a small business to automatically do that? Does it fit with systems? And there may be further conferees that will address that question.
Representative, that's a great question, and a lot of the onus here is on the platform. So it would be Walmart.com's job to go out and make sure to verify the information with that third-party seller as yourself. So I would reach out or have in my application for you to even get on our website, you would have to provide that information. And that's how we do that, is in that application to get your product on our site, you have to provide a lot of what's here. And Mr. Chairman, if I may, I just wanted to address somebody else's question earlier. Yeah, this does read a lot like an e-fairness bill, and that's because we're dealing with online marketplace. So in the description, you're defining third-party seller, things like that, but this is not any type of tax increase.
Representative Ralph.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Couple of areas here, and I will confess I haven't dug deep into this, but help me figure out how does this, to the extent that I read all the way down in it, how does this help prevent fraudulent activity, or is this about punishing it after it has occurred? Because is there some type of required verification going on here? I mean, don't fraudulent people just give fraudulent information to start with?
That's another great question, Representative. So it goes after both. So it's trying to prohibit, if a vendor is trying to get on Walmart.com's website with their product, they're going to be checked out before their product goes live. So hopefully we stop that counterfeit item before it even goes live. Now on the backside, let's say they did provide something that maybe checked out and it was some of the wrong information or something, or somehow they got through. once we're able to get them out of the system and hopefully turn them over to law enforcement, it'll be tougher for them to get onto another site.
But does in this legislation, to use Walmart as an example, are you required anywhere in there to verify to some extent the information you're provided?
Correct, yes, we would have to verify. That's at the heart of this bill.
The bill requires you to verify the information?
Correct.
Okay. And secondly, what's the Attorney General expected to do here? I saw a rules and regs requirement. What's the expectation of the Attorney General?
It basically gives them the ability to go after and enforce the law and try to prosecute some of these bad actors.
Do you have something in mind when you talk about giving rules and reg authority to? I'm trying to picture what rule and reg would you envision the AG might need to put in place?
I'd rely on the revisor's office and the Attorney General's office on that, but I'm guessing it would just beef up their opportunity to go after some of these larger bad actors.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Burrows.
Thank you. I want to get back to a question that was asked earlier about the $5,000. Is that the cliff? Because I believe I heard you say if they were over 5,000, just barely, there was a remedy there. Do you know where that $5,000 cliff came from?
Yeah, so it's just part of the model legislation. We were trying to set a bar for that for the transaction and for that gross yearly income to try to not take it, not put any hardship on small businesses. But if it does go, what I was getting at is if it does go over that $5,000 limit, then again, that seller would have to provide that information to, the online platform would have to get that information from the third-party seller, the individual. And what I was talking about is if, for instance, if I'm selling some football cards out of my house and I, have or my mom's selling my baseball cards from when I'm a kid, and if she puts those on there and she gets over, $5,000, let's say they sell for $5,100, then the online platform, if she continues to do business, would have to verify her information to make sure she's not, continuing to sell items, and just verify that she is who she is.
Representative Hsu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I certainly don't support the selling of counterfeit NFL jerseys after the Super Bowl. I think the Chiefs are going to need every cent of that for the offensive line. My question is, so basically, you said Walmart already does all of this, and it's essentially requiring all the other high-volume marketplace sellers to comply with the same requirements. Would you be willing to make the claim, or do you have the data to show that Walmart has substantially lower fraud claims or fraud, pursuance than the others? Or
Well, some of that would probably, we wouldn't be able to share a lot of that information because then you get into your sales. So a lot of that information wouldn't be able to be shared with competitors. So no, there's no real way to be able to show that. But I think from my colleagues who are also going to be testimonying, they can give percentages of what they're being seen, or how much product's being stolen from their stores or things like that. But no, I don't think you would be able to see a comparison of site to site who's doing what, unfortunately.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ryan, I'm just curious if this isn't something that could be done within the industry, self-policing themselves, as part of the terms and conditions of selling online rather than compulsion by a government.
That's a good point, sir. But obviously we're all in business and we're all competing against each other, and so I don't think there's any formal way to come together and agree upon a set of rules and engagement for your online business, unfortunately.
Ryan, does that mean you're not willing to work with the opposition to come up with a kind of an agreement?
Absolutely, absolutely. We'd love to work with our opposition on this, and we have reached out to them multiple times in multiple states, and they're not willing to work on any type of compromise. We've sent them the language here, and received language from the feds on the language from the federal government for the federal bill was what they marked up and sent back to us. So. No, there hasn't been any give on their end on wanting to compromise. And
so I think we're going to hear from them later, but why would it be that they're so adamantly against this if it's so easy, like you say, you're simply collecting information? Are you liable for these vendors on your website if they start selling illegal merchandise or stolen merchandise and they're caught? Is Walmart liable for that, or is Amazon liable for that?
That's a great question, Mr. Chair. And no, that would go back to the third-party seller, the criminal who's putting the counterfeit item on that platform. So obviously, it's in your best interest as a Walmart to try to take care of your customer. So yeah, you're gonna bend over backwards, but at the end of the day, it's going to go back to that third-party seller. And then also regarding your other question, I can't speak for our opposition, but without verification, it's giving them speed to market. They're able to just add thousands and thousands of vendors to their platform every day with no verification. And obviously those sales, whether they be counterfeit or perfectly fine, are still generating them revenue.
So this bill doesn't have a timeline, like if I start marketing things on eBay and I hit $5,000, I have to stop selling until I fill out the proper paperwork, or does it give them a period of time?
It's within a fiscal year of hitting that the $5,000 or transaction limit, Mr. Chairman. And again, the onus is on the platform, not the customer, to be able to provide that.
So once they hit $5,000, they have to shut me down until they get the information they need.
No, so they would it would take by this bill they would have basically 3 days to verify your information.
Okay, Representative Highland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for bringing this before. You said a couple of things, but the one thing you said, this is model legislation. How many states have you put this into?
Gosh, so I have Kansas, Nebraska, South Dakota, and Colorado for the company, and so we are working on introducing it in Colorado. It's been introduced in Nebraska, and then we're here. I don't think we'll get it introduced in Nebraska this year. I think they're close to finishing up. My colleague from Home Depot, I believe, has a better national number for you.
You mentioned a federal law. Is there a federal law coming?
There is federal legislation with both Republican and Democrat co-sponsors, but Kansas consumers relying on the feds to act. Obviously they move pretty slow, so you have no idea if or when something will get passed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Williams.
Mr. Chairman, so Walmart, when I go online and I want to purchase something from the Walmart website, it is considered a marketplace facilitator, meaning you do have some third-party options that you sell on your website?
Absolutely, yeah. So probably the majority of our online offering is third-party sellers. So just like Amazon.com and others, obviously we have a large brick and mortar retail space, so a lot of those items can be fulfilled by Walmart or will come off directly from a Walmart shop. But yeah, every day we're increasing our third-party sellers on our website.
And if I bought a pair of shoes off of your website, then it would say where that's coming from. If it was coming from China or Minneapolis, it would have that?
Correct. It's going to have the information for the business on there. So it's going to say sold by Walmart, but fulfilled by, and then that company name.
And if that item was counterfeit, could I take it to a Walmart and be reimbursed for that?
So yes, you would have, yes, customer service options would be available to you to get a refund. And again, we would help work with that third-party seller to get that back.
And if I were to purchase a product that was counterfeit from Amazon, do you know whether or not Amazon would refund, or would I have to go through my credit card company and have that payment, stopped or paid back because the item was fraudulent?
You'll have to talk to Amazon for that. I don't want to answer for them.
Okay, so, and thank you, Ryan, I appreciate that, because this is actually, your testimony says it's a $500 billion industry. I know with my 4 kids that are ordering on Amazon all the time and other places, this happens too frequently, and we've had to go back, and when we get the counterfeit shoes that look like the ones that were supposed to be made in Europe, and they're clearly not, then we have to go through a process where we try to get that reimbursed from our credit card, and that takes a process. And so I do think consumers do need protection. It happens frequently. $500 billion tells us it's not just a casual, rare occurrence. It's a common occurrence. So I appreciate this bill being brought forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative.
Representative Probst.
Thank you. Thank you for testifying today. Just for the sake of discussion and to maybe take a different point on this, if I understand this right, part of the issue is that you're losing merchandise that's then being sold. Is that part of the driver of this?
Yep.
If I look at this one way, I would say that that's your problem. Like you have a shrinkage problem. Why would I want to pass legislation to restrict third-party sellers when it's something that you can control?
Well, that's a great point, but would a consumer feel great in knowing that they're buying a fraudulent or stolen product? And at the end of the day, that it's likely, depending on the loss, that the customer is going to see that in a price point later on down the road, depending on how large the issue is. There's large fencing operations out there where you have houses full of Walmart goods that have been stolen from our shelves, and they're out there every day selling those items. And again, that seller at the end of the line doesn't know where exactly their product is coming from. So if it's a defective product that they're getting from stolen, they really don't have any way to get a refund or get that back. Or if they do happen to take it back to a store and they're notified by the store that it's stolen, where did it come from? And then they have to go down that route.
Seeing no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, committee.
On to Mindy Baker with the Toy Association. She's on virtual.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Yes, my name is Mindy Baker, and if you could see me and see my office, you would know that I'm definitely with the Toy Association. Sorry I can't be with you all today. As the daughter of a man born in Muncie, Kansas, I certainly wish I could be. My name is Mindy Baker, and I am with the Toy Association. Our association, just as a little bit of background, we've been around since 1916, so we're just over 100 years old. We have over 1,000 members, and I always joke, I'll buy you a drink at the bar later if you can name more than 4. That's because of our 1,000 members, 95% of our industry is considered small business. So 95% is small business in Kansas, you beat that, and 100% of our industry in Kansas is small business. Our industry, even though we're small, we have a big impact. In Kansas, our industry is about $1.1 billion. That's because toys, if you think about it as an industry, we're sold everywhere. The most rural area, you're going to still find toys being sold, whether that's at a feed store or gas station, wholesale, resale, distribution, etc. Somebody has a really cool idea and they bring it to market. This bill for us is a consumer safety and a children's safety issue. When counterfeit products are sold online, children's toys go through about roughly over 100 unique safety tests. They have to be tested at third-party independent labs before they can make it to market, no matter where they're produced. If you're going to see a toy on a shelf in Kansas, it's been safety tested. If it gets online, potentially, if it's counterfeit or otherwise a knockoff, it might not have made those same safety tests, those standards. And that's a potential harm to our children. I'm not saying that, a knockoff bag or a knockoff jersey isn't a problem, but it's not a health and safety problem. A knockoff toy can hurt a child, and we have cases, documented cases, of children being hurt, and in some cases, severely and significantly hospitalized because of a bad product. This happens. This happens on a semi-regular basis, certainly enough times that we notice. And this is a problem. We talk about why people buy online. It's because it's fast. The most often cited reason why someone would purchase online is because of the price and because of fast shipping. Usually if the price is low and the shipping is good, it's because it's not being tested, it's counterfeit. We talked about, you want to talk about the potential for stolen goods being an issue. Why should I care that a product is stolen from a large online market or a large brick and mortar? Sometimes if a product is not cared for in the proper way, there's a potential for that product to have been altered. And if it's not cared for in a way that it needs to be, by the time it gets to the consumer, it might then have become unsafe. So a safe product in a brick and mortar store might become unsafe if it's not cared for in a right manner. Think about in electronics. I know my colleague from Home Depot is going to go in a minute, but you certainly don't want some kind of, a chainsaw that has been, sitting out some way to kick back on you. You don't want medication or vitamins or baby formula to have been taken out of the legitimate supply chain. And these are things that we see happening. Something that, we've seen in our studies, we have research, we've done this, and we've been watching this issue. 1 in 3 toy purchasing parents believe that counterfeit toys are not sold in major online marketplaces. They think that where they're going is safe. They think that these are, this is a good place to go and it's fine. Some of the points that I'll bring up that I think we've heard about in some of our discussion already today. One thing I do want to mention, that this bill pertains to folks who are third-party sellers on marketplaces. So it was mentioned, is this an Amazon and a Bed Bath & Beyond? Amazon, yes. Bed Bath & Beyond, no. If Bed Bath & Beyond is selling product that they purchased on behalf of Bed Bath & Beyond. So this doesn't apply to the products that Amazon is selling on behalf of Amazon. If I go on Amazon and sell on behalf of myself using Amazon's platform, then that's who we're trying to get at. The folks who are selling, using an online marketplace to facilitate their own sales. Again, if you are savvy enough to go on a marketplace, you probably have the 6 pieces of information that we're asking for. You have a name, you have an address, you have a phone number, you have an email address. You should have bank account information because you're asking to get paid. Those are the 6 pieces of information that you were asking that you should be able to submit to a retailer, an online marketplace. And then that online marketplace is required to verify that information. That's all that we're asking the seller themselves to do. Many of my small businesses are the ones that are selling as well. They are fine with providing this information. They have to provide this information to brick and mortars all the time, and in fact, a lot more information. So if they want to sell to the local store down the street, there's a lot more information they have to provide, so they're absolutely fine providing it. Many of my retailers are quite literally 1 and 2 people businesses, small families, so they're completely fine with providing, 6 little bits of information. As was pointed out, if this information is their home, that the bill does allow for them to just use business address. If they're working out of their home, it will allow them to put, say that their home is unavailable. It allows for posting of city information. If they only have a personal phone, it allows for the phone number. It says you can say, I don't have a business line. It allows for you to use an email address provided by the platform. If you don't have a personal business, or you don't have a business email address and you only have a personal address, you can use an email address that is provided by the platform. But what we do have, and we have always said in our communications with folks, is to have an informed consumer. That's where we get the name of the bill. If you are a consumer, know who you're purchasing from. We want some of this information to be disclosed to the consumer, so the consumer knows, who am I buying from? One thing, and then I'm happy to take questions because I think a lot of what I'm going to say is somewhat redundant to my colleagues. One of the things that was pointed out briefly is the other thing that's disclosed is who the purchaser is, if they are, or the seller, if they are the wholesaler, the manufacturer, the distributor, and then who is fulfilling this. Because there is a term called commingling that sometimes gets thrown out. Not every website does it. And I think that's something else that was brought up is our websites and online marketplaces, can they self-police? We have seen, there's a proliferation of new marketplaces coming on board. There's a lot of marketplaces out there that are doing great things and are verifying folks. We want to make sure that every marketplace that comes on board is doing at least the bare minimum to verify who's selling on their platforms. And this just gives a little bit of an even playing field. Commingling is a process where if I'm in Kansas and I know that Ryan is a legitimate guy and he's selling good stuff, so I go on Amazon and I buy from Ryan's store. But the problem is I happen to be located in Chicago, so they're going to send me product from the distribution warehouse that's in Chicago. Now, Ryan gets the sale, but the product comes from the warehouse in Chicago. So that happens to be the bad product that someone else sent. I should know that when I click send or when I click purchase, that it's fulfilled by the warehouse that's local and not the person that I'm buying it from. I should know who is actually physically sending me the product, because it might not be who I purchased it from. Or it might be an instance where in that warehouse, product from different sellers gets mingled into one bin. And counterfeit and stolen product and legitimate product is all put in the same barrel. So we've had instances where manufacturers have gotten returned product back to them and said, wait a minute, this isn't our product, but it was a product that was bought from them. I've had a friend whose home burned down because he bought a charger that they think was counterfeit or otherwise tampered online. We've had kids whose homes burned down, or kids who ended up in the hospital. I have a dear friend who owns a small game company, board games. It's pretty easy to counterfeit those, and the pandemic's been tough on him. He had to take a second job, and because mostly he sells to small businesses. He sells to small mom and pop game stores. They're all closed during the pandemic, and unfortunately, he sells at conventions. Those all got closed. And about 2 months ago, he found out that his product was getting counterfeit online, and it's a real problem. I mean, it's a problem for small businesses. Their products are getting sold. It's a problem for children. They're getting hurt. It's a problem for our older generation. They're not used to purchasing online, and they're buying bad stuff. So, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. But I mean, I think for us at the toy industry, ultimately, we're really worried about the safety of our children. And we've just seen too many kids get hurt and harmed. And we think that this bill in particular gives parents and toy buying adults, essentially, the tools they need to make smart buying decisions. Ultimately, that's what we're looking at. So thanks, and happy to answer any questions.
Any questions, committee? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Jared Holt from Home Depot, and looks like he's virtual as well.
Can you hear me, Mr. Chair?
Yes, we can. We can see you too. Okay,
great. Thank you. Before I get started, I wanted to answer a couple questions that were asked to my good friend, Mr. Irsick. So a gentleman, one of the representatives, asked about why this is a problem. Why aren't we fixing this within our own stores? We are. I think most retailers are doing what's necessary to kind of stop this from happening. But I think a couple things, we don't want to put our associates' lives in jeopardy, and we don't want to put our customers' lives in jeopardy. And, you know, we're seeing a large increase in the flow of these illegal, or excuse me, the flow of criminal activities based around the money that is coming from products that are being stolen and counterfeit. So, you know, and it's going into human trafficking, it's going into the drug trade. So, you know, it can be easy to view it as just a one issue that pertains to retail, but it's a lot larger than that. So that answers that question. And then the states question is it's being heard in about 13 states. So last night in Arkansas, it passed out of the Senate with 33 yay votes and 2 abstentions. And in West Virginia, it passed out of one of the House's committees and it's headed to the House floor. So we're getting traction across the country. So I hope that answers the 2 questions that were asked to Ryan in his testimony. So now I'm going to get started. So thank you. Chairman Tarwater, Vice Chair Corbett, Ranking Member Fraunfelder, and members of the House Commerce, Labor, and Economic Development Committee. On behalf of Home Depot's 18 facilities and more than 3,000 associates, thank you for allowing me to provide testimony and support on House Bill 2433. I know all of you are itching to go and watch college hoops, and especially the Shockers, so I promise to keep this short. My name is Jared Holt, and I serve as a state and local government relations manager for the Home Depot. The bill before you is not only a consumer safety bill, but it also addresses a $30 billion a year issue known as organized retail crime. To put that into perspective, Starbucks did $26 billion in revenue last year. So I like to say that ORC is bigger than Starbucks. When we discuss organized retail crime, I want you to visualize a criminal syndicate and not your traditional petty shoplifter who is looking to steal a small item. These syndicates are well run and well managed. The individuals who are running these rings are constantly evolving in their tactics and strategy. They are researching our store layouts and identifying products with the highest retail value, all the while threatening the safety of our customers and associates. I have a video that I'd like to show the committee that should give you a sense of the level of sophistication that these criminals are using. Hopefully I have the technical ability to show you this video. So bear with me here. I hope this works. I tested it earlier today, but my internet here in Columbus, Ohio is pretty bad. So let's see if this works. Can you guys see it?
Looks like we can.
Okay. So what you're looking at here is what many would believe is to be a Home Depot distribution facility, right? On the looks of it, it kind of looks like that. But as you start to pan around, you know, you start to notice that, hey, this seems a little disorganized for a distribution center. And that's because this is a fencing operation that was busted by local law enforcement. And so these criminals are so organized in the sense that they are constantly evolving, that they've set up these fencing warehouses to harbor products from our stores and many other retailers. And so they've organized it to look exactly like a distribution center that you would see at a Home Depot or a Lowe's or any other big box retailer. But all of these items were going to be sold online. So this kind of gives you a little bit of a sense of what's taking place here. These are all stolen products, all going to be fenced, some online, and you know, I would say probably mostly online at this point. And this was busted by local law enforcement. So this kind of gives you a little bit of a sense of what's taking place. It's not just a petty shoplifting. This is a $1 billion issue. So let me click out of this and see if I can. right. So, sorry about that. So, this is essentially what we are seeing throughout the country, and it's getting worse. It's continued to get worse. It's been getting worse, especially due to COVID. These criminals are evolving. Last night I think you should have received an email from me highlighting a news crime alert from KMBC News 9. It was right before Christmas. I'm not sure if any of you had a chance to check it out. So I think I got a few that have bounced back to me, but one of our Home Depot employees, her name is Christina Cornell, was interviewed by KMBC 9 about the impact of ORC locally. And I would say the main takeaway from this is that it's consistently happening. And I think many folks think that it's just this small issue and it's going to get better with time, but in reality it's really not. And the urgency of the problem it's only been accelerated by the COVID-19 pandemic. And as many Americans have stayed home to promote social distancing, they've increasingly turned onto online marketplaces, purchased cleaning supplies, personal protective equipment, and other household goods. Unfortunately, the lack of regulation on these platforms allowed bad actors to sell illegitimate products, such as hand sanitizers and counterfeit N95 masks, putting lives in jeopardy. 3M, one of our suppliers of N95 masks and other PPE, has removed more than 15,000 fraudulent e-commerce listings to date. And so, what we're saying is that when a retailer sells a product in a brick and mortar store, they're guaranteeing that product is what they say it is, and there are consequences if it's not. That guarantee is not met. The consumer knows how to seek recourse. House Bill 2433 is an extension of that same guarantee and protection to consumers shopping on online marketplaces. Opponents will probably say that this bill will hurt small businesses by wrapping them up in red tape. That's not true. It's false. This bill only asks for 6 simple pieces of information every legitimate business can easily provide and already provide to these e-platform sites: their name, their address, their email, their phone number, their tax ID, and bank account information. And not to go too deep down a rabbit hole, but I spent about an hour and a half on YouTube looking up how to become an actual e-commerce seller. And there are a ton of videos. You can get on YouTube and find it fairly quickly. And in these videos, they tell you, hey, like, this is how you set up your business account. And every single video, everyone who wants to be a seller on Amazon or on any e-commerce platform has to provide all of the information that this bill is requesting. And, we think House Bill 2433 will help weed out criminals selling counterfeit and stolen products at below market rates, hiding behind fake business accounts and screen names. These con artists are currently competing with legitimate businesses, whether they sell through their storefront or online. In this bill, sellers of used or reused goods such as cars, clothes, or furniture are exempted. And also exempted are hobbyists with under 200 transactions and $5,000 in sale. A friend of mine who has the western part of the United States for Home Depot always uses this quote. He says, sunlight is the best disinfectant. And I believe that this bill will provide the consumer with the element of sunlight. And so if any of you have any questions, feel free to ask, and that's all I got.
Committee, any questions? Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would be curious how we came up with the 5,000, and that may have been described a few times, but what is maybe the magic number to that? It seems like some items you might hit that fairly quickly.
Yeah, I mean, so through the chair to the representative, I would say it's been a factor that has been discussed in the federal bill at a federal level. And as Ryan had mentioned, we have taken some of the federal components and utilized that here at the state level. So that is a conversation that has taken place at the federal level.
So, I'm with the earlier representative that, this seems like you need to hire security. I don't see how collecting this information is going to stop having things stolen from your store. They're going to sell it somewhere, somehow.
Well,
they may not be able to sell it
Representative-
online, but so when I guess, are you identifying people that are selling your stolen products, and then when you go to the marketplace facilitator, they won't tell you who they were, so that you can press charges, or what's the crux of this
So
thing?
this would be an easier way for law enforcement, with the help of our asset protection teams on the ground, to stop this from taking place, to bust these individuals who are selling stolen products, right? And Representative, look, I completely understand where you're coming from. Criminals are smart. They're going to make adjustments. They're going to find loopholes. But we believe that this will be a deterrent from stopping them from practicing an organized retail crime. And for your average American who's doing the right thing, it's not going to matter. They're not going to be impacted at all. As Ryan mentioned, and as I've mentioned, it's on the e-commerce platform to verify this third-party vendor. So your mom and pop who are selling more, let's say they have a bookstore, an online bookstore, and they're selling more than $5,000 worth of product, and they have more than 200 transactions. They don't have to worry about anything. The e-commerce site's going to verify it for them. They don't have to do anything extra. We just believe that this is a deterrent for stopping crime. And this crime is not just impacting the consumer. It's not just impacting businesses. It's impacting local law enforcement. I was on a phone call with a friend of mine who's a state representative here in Ohio, and he plans on being the sponsor for us here. And he called me on a Monday. He was headed down to Columbus to have committee, and he said, "Jared, I just got a call from a friend of mine who's a state trooper. He called me and told me that he got in a high-speed chase with an individual who had stolen over $60,000 worth of product from Home Depot and Lowe's. And it got to the point where the local law enforcement, they had to lay out those metal strips to stop this individual. And that they were able to get him, but let's say something bad had happened. People's lives are at risk. So I hope that answers your question, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question really goes to solvency on this. I mean, I agree with you, stealing is bad. I think it was the 2014 legislation that outlawed stealing. Until then, it was legal here in Kansas, but we stopped that, fortunately. My question, though, is they're organized enough to steal an entire warehouse worth of goods. They're organized enough to set up a warehouse to fence the stolen goods. But how is this bill going to stop them from being organized enough to set up a fake point of contact for a platform?
Representative, what do you mean by fake point of contact for a platform? Do you mean a fake address, a fake email?
Yes, all of the above.
So, I would say the onus would be on the e-commerce platform, right? I mean, in order to sell products on the platform, you have to provide this information. So I guess you could say you could create a fake bank account and you could do those things. But, I think a majority of individuals who are already doing, of course, doing the right thing and selling, non-stolen, non-counterfeit products, they would have nothing to worry about. It's the individual who is doing something nefarious. And yeah, they could create a new account and they could jump around and keep doing that, but eventually, like we've seen in other cases, they'll get caught. And we believe that this will stop them, this will deter them from actually starting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so we're going to have to move on now. I'm sorry, we can't. We're running out of time. So thanks for your time, sir. We're going to move on to.
Thank you.
Opponents. I don't see any other proponents. Are there any other proponents that wishes to say anything? Okay. Let's go to the opponents and start with Robert Callahan, Internet Association, and he is virtual.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Robert Callahan, and I'm with the Internet Association. We represent the nation's leading internet companies, including many of the major online marketplaces who will be subject to the requirements of this bill, as well as their sellers who will be directly impacted by it. I appreciate the opportunity today to discuss House Bill 2433, and we did submit a letter yesterday evening to the committee. Apologize for the lateness of this. Let's be clear. Organized retail crime and counterfeiting is a serious issue, and we agree with the proponents on that. We do not agree that this bill provides a solution. And I do appreciate the conversation of this committee today, which despite the claims that this is just very simple information and therefore is a simple bill to comply with, it is obviously something much more than that and much more complex. A primary concern that we have is going to be the negative impact that the requirements of this bill will have on small businesses, solo entrepreneurs, micro businesses in the state of Kansas who are currently selling online and making ends meet from these online marketplaces, particularly in a pandemic. The timing of this measure seems very ill-advised. We would be more than happy to continue conversations with the proponents on what would make sense and what would be most useful to combat these clear problems that exist. But this bill is not the answer. And getting back to some of the questions about where we're seeing this started as federal conversations at the federal level. We agree with representatives who have suggested a federal solution probably would make the most sense given the sort of borderless medium of the internet. And those conversations are ongoing. But meanwhile, this bill has been introduced in over 15 states. We're having these conversations. It's language that does not include input from the online marketplaces of this country, and therefore we have serious concerns with it. We're more than happy to continue talking with the members, but we think rushing this through does not make great sense. Now, the information required to be provided to the online marketplace is seemingly simple information. Is the fact that every requirement in this legislation falls on the online marketplace and subjects them to civil liability through the Kansas Consumer Protection Act as a deceptive act or deceptive practice for getting it wrong at any point. And so what we're doing through this bill is we're making online marketplaces choose between subjecting themselves to significant exposure to civil liability by trying to keep all these sellers on the platform as they hit the threshold for a high volume third-party seller, or removing or suspending those accounts because they can't meet the requirements of verifying the legitimacy of all of those pieces of information within the 3-day time period. And there was some question earlier about when this kicks in. That's part of the problem. Every time a seller, and we're talking, and one of the representatives mentioned this is a very high volume of vendors we're talking about, it is. That's part of the problem. As these vendors reach the threshold of 200 transactions plus north of $5,000 over the previous, at any point over a 12-month period, they immediately become a high volume third-party seller. They have 24 hours to give this information to the marketplace. The marketplace has 3 days to verify that that information is all accurate, which includes the items of information that's already been mentioned. It also includes verifying where they sell that information outside of that marketplace. So there's a lot of verification that's required. Get that verification wrong, that falls on the online marketplace in the form of liability. This is putting marketplaces in the position of, well, we're not totally sure, but we don't want to kick off a seller, which are going to be these small micro business, small businesses, individual sellers. or we're going to suspend them until we can wrap our hands around what the actual information is and verify it. And so that is, while the information is simple, the requirements are not, and puts us in a very untenable position. Another point was mentioned about not targeting small businesses. Again, it's true that this bill does not attach any liability to a small business, but all of the liability does fall on the online marketplace, who, I think there was reference to the notion that the sellers can request that they don't have their personal home address included, or their cell phone number included if it's personal information that they don't want included. However, they must demonstrate to the marketplace that information is true, and that they don't have these other phone numbers or these other business addresses or anything like that. So there is an obligation, again, for the marketplace to go and make a decision based on demonstrated evidence from the third-party seller, and then make a decision about whether to include or not include that personal information on the listing. If you get that wrong, you're in violation of the Kansas Consumer Protection Act. None of our companies who are leading online marketplace companies who do a ton of volume of sales in Kansas and elsewhere throughout the country want to be non-compliant with an act like the Kansas Consumer Protection Act. We have no interest in doing that. We do verify much of this information already. The difference is obviously the very specific mandates of this bill, the short time frames, and the serious liability that befalls online marketplace if they make a misstep at any point along the way. Another thing that's just been mentioned elsewhere is here, online marketplaces, maybe you just get this information from all your sellers ahead of time, so that you have it. And so when they reach this threshold of this, $5,000 plus 200 transactions, then you have the information already, and there's less of a logjam for compliance. The problem is you have 3 days to verify it. So if I collected all of it from all of my sellers, which is a big challenge to begin with, once they reach that high volume third-party seller threshold, I've got 3 days to verify it. Now, if I got that information 7 months ago, in an effort to try to get ahead of this issue, I have a choice of either saying, I'm going to rely on that information from 7 months ago, or I got to go verify it again. And I've got 72 hours to do it, and I've got 10,000 of these on my desk right now. So this is going to create problems for actual sellers in the United States and in Kansas, whether we want it to or not, because of the mandates. And there is a point later in the bill, page 4, where if the online marketplace discovers a false representation from a third-party seller, or that they're not being responsive to consumers who are reaching out to them, that does not, those provisions actually just trigger a requirement on the online marketplace to then, either put that information back up or suspend the seller. So anything, as was, I think, the last conversation with the Home Depot representative, it was mentioned about fake accounts and fake phone numbers and everything. The seller does not suffer any liability from that. It all comes back to online marketplace, who, if they're deceived by the seller, there's no provision in there that says, we suddenly are absolved from liability. So as a final point, I would just say again, we think organized retail crime is clearly a problem where companies are working actively and proactively with retailers, law enforcement, and others to help attack this problem. We don't think this bill provides a reasonable solution, and frankly, can it come at a worse time in the middle of an economic decline and a public health pandemic. So I very much appreciate the committee's time and the ability to testify. Happy to answer questions.
Thank you for your testimony. I'm just sitting here thinking, my gosh, it really doesn't seem like a whole lot of information that you have to get. And it's a prudent business thing to have somebody's name and their email address and their phone number. There's really not much to this bill. I just don't get it. I don't get there's got to be more to this because this is simple stuff. That's just my opinion. Representative Williams.
Mr. Chairman. So I had a few questions for you. First, how do marketplace facilitators facilitators provide payment to their third-party vendors?
It would vary by marketplace, and we represent a decent handful of the major marketplaces. If that information would be helpful going forward, happy to provide that. But a little similar to the point raised just a second ago is, bank account information is required to be turned over as part of this. And it needs to be verified either by a payment processor or by the online marketplace or some other third party. Again, verifying the legitimacy of what we receive, we're on the hook for not getting that correct, but also it's a privacy concern for the tens of thousands of hundreds of thousands of folks who will be required to turn this over to there's 50 plus marketplaces that are US based. And so I think this is a fairly significant requirement that has privacy implications for.
Okay, sir, so on that, the answer to that question is the marketplace facilitator has to deposit the money for the sold goods to the vendor. So they have an account, correct?
I can follow up with you.
Yes or no?
It's going to vary from marketplace to marketplace. Some are processed through third-party payment processors, not through the actual marketplace itself.
Okay, and then the second thing is that the bill requires the marketplace facilitator to identify the seller and their basic contact information. Are you telling me that that's not standard practice, that you would let people sell products and you don't know who they are or what their contact information is?
It is absolutely standard practice. The bill puts forward specific requirements where any misstep subjects us to liability under the Kansas Consumer Protection Act. That is the problem. We're doing so much of this already on our own, but if there is a misstep, if it turns out that we did verify somebody who gave us fake information, there could be liability for us.
So you have the information. You would definitely have a data system that would have this information. So now this bill just requires you to disclose that information. So that would not be an additional cost to you. Perhaps the cost may be that your industry could lose $500 billion of counterfeit or fraudulent items being sold. Is that the concern?
That's definitely not the concern. We certainly don't, these marketplaces are based on trust with our consumers. To the extent that there are counterfeit goods or organized retail crime goods appearing on the marketplaces, that is a negative for these marketplaces. We have no interest in that. And so our interest very much is in helping with the fight on organized retail crime, but the requirements and the specific requirements of this bill that I think this discussion so far today has revealed are extensive. Every single piece of the bill puts liability on the online marketplace and nobody else. This is about us, and any misstep, there is no leniency for any sort of misstep on the online marketplace. And again, we're talking volumes of hundreds of thousands or more of these types of dollars.
I'm sorry. I think you've answered her question. We're going to have to move on in the interest of time. Chris,
Can I just make one last comment? I was just going to say that right now, the marketplace facilitators, those such as Amazon, they have no trouble supporting and spending money to fact check freedom of speech, but yet we don't want to fact check somebody that's selling products on our sites. I think that's sad. Thank you.
With that, we'll move on to the next testimony. And that's Tyler Deers from TechNet.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, members
Tyler,
of the
we
committee.
have 5 minutes left in this committee, and so.
Sure thing.
Sorry to cut you short, but if you're anything like the previous people, we're going to be here for a long time. So you've got 5 minutes max. Thanks.
Understand. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Tyler Deers. I'm the executive director for TechNet for the Midwest. TechNet is a national bipartisan network of technology CEOs and senior executives. We promote the growth of the innovation economy by advocating for a targeted policy agenda at the federal and 50 state level. I'm testifying in opposition to House Bill 2433. We did submit a letter detailing our concerns earlier this morning, but again, in short, we're opposed because this legislation would, one, hamper marketplaces' technological ability to identify and remove illegal goods, create privacy risks for small businesses and individual sellers, who sell online and do little to actually slow organized retail crime. I will start off by noting that it is in each marketplace's interest to maintain trust with consumers that use their platform. Selling illegal and counterfeit products is a serious issue, and that is exactly why online marketplaces are heavily invested in technologies, personnel, and processes that identify bad actors and remove them from their platforms. These tools are constantly being improved to ensure that they can accurately target bad actors. These requirements into the bill also fail to take into account the vastly different business models of different online marketplaces that provide service to millions of Kansas customers. Second, the bill would force Kansas to compromise private personal information in order to continue to sell on online platforms. The public could easily learn, for example, the name, as I mentioned, to those who are selling their creations online merely because they average 4 sales a week. The open display of this information, which would be required by entrepreneurial Kansans simply monetizing their hobbies, could potentially lead to dangerous situations. And those unwilling to divulge highly personal information would be forced to stop listing their products and lost essential revenue streams. I think we hear a lot today about concerns about personal data being on the internet, and here we are compelling and forcing that information to be out on the internet. Finally, this bill would do little to actually slow organized retail crime, but much to place burdensome administrative requirements on online marketplaces that big box retailers would not have to obey by. The ultimate hurts Kansas businesses that sell online marketplaces and Kansas consumers who would then have fewer goods made available to them. It was mentioned that we've seen law enforcement target some of these facilities. Law enforcement and local prosecutors have investigative tools to pursue and arrest bad actors that are found to be dealing in illicit and illegal goods. These law enforcement officials and retailers are already working closely with online marketplaces to crack down on any goods that are stolen. There's also recourse for the Attorney General to target wrongdoers by pursuing charges for fraud and deceptive trade practices. And just as brick and mortar retailers are able to institute voluntary business practices that help to remediate organized retail crime, marketplaces similarly should have the same flexibility to institute business practices without this sort of prescriptive regulation. Therefore, we respectfully oppose this legislation, Mr. Chairman, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the conferee? All right. So thank you, sir, for being expedient. No questions. Seeing no questions. So thank you very much, and we'll move on to. I have Amazon down has a written opponent, but I see they're represented here. Did you want to speak today, sir? Do you care to address the statement Representative Williams made?
Matt Hickam with Hickam Public Affairs, representing Amazon.com. I would reference the multi-page information that was submitted by both the opponents of this legislation, both the Internet Association and TechNet. It's pretty detailed as far as the opposition. Amazon has a written-only statement, and I'll just leave it at that.
Representative Williams.
Great to see you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you mean that Amazon can get me a product in one day, but they can't verify and certify that a product is not fraudulent and just provide me a name?
What I can say is that Amazon has an A to Z guarantee on any product that they sell on their third-party marketplace, and is 100% refund for anything that you buy that you're not satisfied with.
But you won't provide a name?
I don't know the ins and outs specifically of Amazon's processes.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none. We'll go ahead and close the hearing on HB 2433. And I know you guys were all excited to pass out a bunch of bills today, but unfortunately we're not going to get to any of those. So we'll have to carry those on to Monday. And also I failed to recognize Representative Poston, who's here with us today as a substitute. So welcome to committee, and sorry you didn't get to vote on anything. We're adjourned.